Sarah lay in her hospital bed, the steady drip of her IV marking time like a metronome, while her mother's voice sliced through the sterile air. "You've always been useless. Even getting sick is just another burden you've put on this family." Neither of them noticed the small red light blinking on the nurse's phone, capturing every syllable of those venomous words. Nor did they see the tears welling up in the eyes of the veteran nurse who had witnessed countless family moments in her 20 years of service, but never anything quite like this. What Sarah's mother didn't realize was that this recorded moment would set in motion a chain of events that would not only transform her daughter's life, but also expose a darkness that had been hiding behind their family's perfect facade for far too long. If you, like us, believe in standing up against abuse and protecting those who need our support, please subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any of these powerful stories. Thank you. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah stared at the ceiling, her mother's footsteps fading down the hospital corridor. At 19, she had learned to cry silently, tears sliding sideways into her dark hair spread across the sterile, white pillow. The words still echoed in her head, not just today's, but 20 years of carefully crafted cruelty. She remembered her 5th birthday party, the one that never happened. "You're not worth the expense," her mother had said, straightening her designer blazer in the mirror. Besides, who would come? Sarah had spent that evening drawing a birthday cake in crayon, complete with imaginary friends around the paper table. Her father had been different. Before the accident that took him away when she was 7, he would sit for hours watching her draw, his gentle eyes crinkling at the corners. "My little artist," he'd whisper, hanging even her simplest scribbles on his office wall. But after he died, those drawings disappeared, along with every other trace of his warmth. The chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis came at 14, after months of unexplained exhaustion and pain. Rather than concern, her mother's response had been immediate and cutting. "Trust you to find a way to be even more disappointing." The condition worsened over the years, her mother's disdain growing alongside her symptoms. Sarah's fingers traced the IV line running into her arm. This latest hospitalization had come after a particularly severe crash, her body finally rebelling against years of pushing through exhaustion to meet her mother's impossible standards. Even now, she could hear her mother's voice on the phone, with her friends. "Such a burden, but what can you do? It's a mother's duty to bear these crosses." A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. It was probably another nurse, coming to check her vitals or adjust her medication. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes with her blanket, an instinctive gesture born from years of hiding her pain. Her mother had always said crying was manipulation, a weak person's way of seeking attention. Sometimes Sarah wondered if she even knew how to cry properly anymore. Nurse Jenny Martinez had seen a lot in her 20 years at Memorial Hospital, but something about Sarah Henderson's case pulled at her heart in a way few others had. Maybe it was the way the girl seemed to fold into herself whenever her mother entered the room, or how her eyes would dart to the door at the slightest sound, like a frightened animal anticipating harm. "Good evening, Sarah," Jenny said softly, entering the room with her customary warm smile. "I brought you something." She pulled a small sketchbook and a set of colored pencils from her scrub's pocket. "One of the orderlies mentioned you like to draw." Sarah's eyes widened, her pale fingers reaching out hesitantly before pulling back. I couldn't. My mother says art is a waste of time. Your mother isn't here right now," Jenny replied, placing the supplies on the bedside table. "And sometimes the things that heal us aren't always what others understand." Jenny understood more than Sarah knew. 25 years ago, she had been the one in a hospital bed with a different kind of mother, but the same hollow look in her eyes. It had been a nurse then too, an older woman named Grace, who had seen past the bruises to the truth beneath. As Sarah tentatively picked up a pencil, Jenny busied herself checking vital signs, pretending not to notice the girl's trembling hands or the way her shoulders gradually relaxed as color began flowing onto the paper. The monitor's steady beeping provided a rhythm to the scratch of pencil on paper. "You know," Jenny said casually, adjusting the IV drip, "we have an art therapy program here at the hospital. Some of our long-term patients find it really helpful." "Really?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but there was a spark of interest there that Jenny hadn't seen before. "Really? In fact," Jenny paused, considering her next words carefully, "I've been thinking about your case, Sarah. Would you be comfortable if I brought in Dr. Thomas? He's one of our younger residents, but he specializes in chronic fatigue syndrome and has some innovative ideas about treatment approaches. Sarah's pencil stilled. My mother, she likes our current doctor, Dr. Richardson. Dr. Richardson is excellent, Jenny agreed, but sometimes a fresh perspective can make all the difference. And you're 19 now, you have the right to be involved in your own treatment decisions. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah's hand moved again, adding shadows to whatever she was drawing. Jenny caught a glimpse. It was a window, but instead of the actual view of the parking lot, Sarah had created a garden full of wildflowers. Beautiful, Jenny murmured. Sarah's cheeks flushed. It's just a sketch. Sometimes the most important things start as just something. Jenny checked her watch. I'll be back in a bit for your evening meds. Think about Dr. Thomas, okay? As she left the room, Jenny's hand brushed against her phone where the recording from earlier sat like a loaded gun. She hadn't planned to record Mrs. Henderson's tirade. It had been instinct, born from years of working with abuse victims. Now, though, she had decisions to make. The hospital had strict policies about patient privacy, but they also had obligations. To report suspected abuse, Jenny thought of Grace, her nurse from all those years ago, who had made a choice that changed everything. Sometimes, she realized, protecting privacy meant exposing secrets. Jenny's documentation began small, a notebook entry here, a time-stamped observation there. But as the days passed, other staff members began approaching her with their own stories. Lisa from reception mentioned how Mrs. Henderson would call multiple times daily, demanding information about Sarah's visitors. James, the night security guard, reported Mrs. Henderson attempting to access Sarah's room outside of visiting hours, becoming belligerent when denied entry. She cornered me in the cafeteria, Dr. Richardson confided one afternoon, running a hand through his graying hair. Insisted we discharge Sarah tomorrow. When I explained that her daughter's condition hasn't stabilized, she suggested I might reconsider if she made a generous donation to the hospital's new wing. Jenny added these accounts to her growing file, each entry another piece in a disturbing puzzle. But it was the arrival of Sarah's brother Mark that truly began to shift the ground beneath their feet. He appeared on a Tuesday afternoon, tall and well-dressed like his mother, but with something of his father's gentleness around the eyes. Jenny watched from the nurse's station as he hesitated outside Sarah's door, knuckles white around a paper coffee cup. "She's having a good day," Jenny offered, approaching him. "The new medication seems to be helping." Mark startled, coffee sloshing. "Oh, thank you. I'm Mark, Sarah's brother." "I know," Jenny smiled warmly. "She has your picture on her nightstand." His expression flickered. Surprise, guilt, something else. "She does. From your graduation, I think. She's very proud of you." Mark's eyes grew bright. "I should have come sooner. Mom said..." Well, she said a lot of things. Inside the room, Sarah's face lit up at the sight of her brother, then immediately dimmed as she glanced past him, clearly expecting their mother to materialize. When she didn't, Sarah's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Hey, Squirt," Mark said, softly, using a nickname that made Sarah smile despite herself. "Nice digs." "Very exclusive," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than Jenny had ever heard it. 5-star room service, though the view leaves something to be desired. Jenny quietly checked Sarah's vitals, pretending not to notice as the siblings gradually rediscovered their rhythm. Their conversation started hesitantly, safe topics like Mark's new job at a law firm, the weather, hospital food, but slowly began to crack open like a shell too long sealed. "Mom told me you were too sick for visitors," Mark finally said, staring at his empty coffee cup. "She said you didn't want to see anyone." Sarah's fingers twisted in her blanket. "She told me you were too busy, that you didn't want to be bothered." T.Q. Silence that followed was heavy with 20 years of manufactured distance. "Mr. Henderson," Jenny interrupted gently, "would you mind stepping out for a moment? I need to check your sister's medication schedule with you." In the hallway, Jenny showed him the recording. Mark's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions as his mother's voice filled the small space between them. Useless burden, disappointment. When it finished, he looked like a man who had finally found the missing piece to a puzzle he'd been trying to solve his entire life. "There's more," Jenny said quietly. "Other staff members have noticed patterns. Dr. Richardson has concerns about your mother's interference with Sarah's treatment. And," she hesitated, then pressed on, "we have reason to believe your mother may be attempting to gain control of Sarah's medical decisions, despite Sarah being legally competent to make them herself. Mark's lawyer training kicked in. She'd need to prove Sarah's incompetent, get a court order. Exactly, and given your mother's resources, she could do it. Mark ran a hand over his face. God, I've been so blind. All these years, I thought. Sarah was the lucky one, getting to stay home with Mom while I was shipped off to boarding school. But she was just isolating her, wasn't she? Jenny nodded slowly. We're building a case file. But Sarah needs allies, Mr. Henderson. She needs her brother. Through the door's window, they could see Sarah drawing in her sketchbook, her face peaceful for the first time since Jenny had met her. Mark watched his sister for a long moment, something hardening in his expression. Tell me what I can do to help. The truth about the trust fund emerged on a rainy Thursday morning, buried in a stack of papers Mark had retrieved from his father's old law partner. Sarah sat propped up in her hospital bed, stronger now after 2 weeks of uninterrupted treatment, while Mark paced the room, reading excerpts from their father's will. It's all here, he said, voice tight with anger. Dad left each of us $2 million in trust, accessible when we turned 21. Mine's already been transferred. I thought Mom had helped arrange it, but now... He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like their father that Sarah's heart clenched. She never told you about any of this, did she? Sarah shook her head, mind spinning. But I turned 21 in 3 months. Exactly. Mark's laugh was bitter. And suddenly Mom's pushing for medical power of attorney, trying to have you declared incompetent. It all makes sense now. Jenny, who had been quietly checking Sarah's charts, spoke up. Mrs. Henderson's behavior has been escalating. Yesterday, she tried to convince Dr. Thomas that Sarah's mental state is deteriorating. But I'm getting better, Sarah protested. The new treatment plan is working wonderfully, Jenny confirmed. Your latest tests show significant improvement. But your mother has been selective about which medical reports she shares with her lawyers. Mark stopped pacing, his face darkening. She's building a case. If she can prove Sarah's unable to manage her own affairs before she turns 21, she keeps control of the money, Sarah finished, her voice small. She never wanted me to get better, did she? The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, rain pattered against the window, nature's quiet accompaniment to this family tragedy. There's something else, Mark said finally, pulling out another document. Dad's letter to his partner, written just before the accident. He was planning to divorce Mom. He discovered some financial irregularities in her charitable foundation. A sharp gasp from the doorway cut him off. Dr. Thomas stood there, chart in hand, looking apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this might be relevant. Mrs. Henderson was just at the nurse's station trying to access Sarah's complete medical history. When denied, she mentioned something about transferring Sarah to a private facility in Switzerland. Sarah's heart monitor betrayed her spike of fear with a rapid beeping. Jenny moved quickly to her side, but Sarah waved her away, forcing herself to take deep breaths. She can't, Mark said firmly. Not without Sarah's consent, unless she gets that. Court order, Jenny reminded them. And she's been laying the groundwork, documenting every pain spike as mental distress, every moment of fatigue as cognitive decline. Sarah looked down at her hands, pale against the hospital blanket. For years, she'd believed her mother's narrative, that she was weak, helpless, a burden. But now, seeing the elaborate web of lies and manipulation, something else began to burn in her chest. Not fear this time, anger. I want to fight back, she said, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. I don't care about the money, but I won't let her control my life anymore. Mark reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You're not alone this time, Squirt. We'll fight together. And you have allies, Jenny added, sharing a meaningful look with Dr. Thomas. More than your mother knows. Thunder rumbled outside, as if nature itself was underlining the gravity of the moment. Sarah looked around at these people. Her brother returned to her side. Jenny, who had seen her truth and refused to look away. Dr. Thomas, whose new treatment plan was helping her reclaim her strength. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope. Word spread quietly through Memorial Hospital's halls, passed in whispered conversations and meaningful glances. From the cafeteria workers who made sure Sarah got extra portions of her favorite foods, to the janitor who would whistle cheerful tunes while cleaning her room, a protective network formed around the young patient in room 412. Dr. Thomas had become a regular presence, his youthful enthusiasm for medicine matched by a fierce determination to document every aspect of Sarah's improving condition. "Your body is responding remarkably well to the new treatment protocol," he explained one morning, showing her the latest test results. "These numbers, they tell a very different story than what your mother's been claiming." "Speaking of documentation," Jenny added, adjusting Sarah's IV, "security picked up something interesting on yesterday's footage." The video, played on Jenny's tablet, showed Mrs. Henderson at the nurse's station after hours, attempting to access the medical records computer, while the desk was momentarily unmanned. When confronted by security, she'd claimed to be looking for a tissue. "She's getting desperate," Mark observed. He'd taken to working remotely from Sarah's room, his laptop balanced on the window ledge. "Her lawyers have been calling mine, pushing for an emergency competency hearing." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she sketched in her notebook, a new habit that both calmed and strengthened her. The page showed a series of hands, some reaching down, others reaching up, forming a chain of support. "How long can we hold her off?" "Long enough," came a new voice from the doorway. A tall woman in a crisp suit stood there, her dark hair streaked with silver. "I'm Patricia Chen from Legal Aid. Nurse Martinez contacted me about your case." Jenny straightened, meeting Sarah's startled look. "Ms. Chen specializes in cases involving medical rights and family law. She's helped other patients in similar situations." Patricia moved into the room with quiet authority, her presence somehow making the small space feel more secure. "I've reviewed your file, Sarah. Your mother's attempts to gain medical power of attorney show a clear pattern of manipulation. The hospital's documentation, combined with the staff's observations and that recording, give us solid ground to stand on." "But the competency hearing," Sarah began. "Will work in our favor," Patricia interrupted gently. "Every day you're here, getting proper treatment without your mother's interference, you're proving your ability to make sound medical decisions. Dr. Thomas's reports show clear improvement under the new treatment plan you chose to pursue." As if to emphasize the point, Sarah sat up straighter, reaching for the water glass on her bedside table without assistance, a small gesture that would have been impossible weeks ago. Jenny noticed her hand didn't shake at all. "There's something else," Dr. Thomas said, pulling up another chart on his tablet. "We found discrepancies in Sarah's previous medical records, symptoms reported by Mrs. Henderson that don't match the attending physician's observations, medications added to her regimen without proper documentation of need, almost as if someone wanted to keep her sick," Mark muttered, his typing becoming more aggressive. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Medical manipulation is a serious offense. If we can prove—" She was interrupted by an overhead announcement. "Security to 4th floor, room 412, security to 4th floor." Jenny moved quickly to the door, looking out. "Your mother's here, Sarah, and she's brought company." Through the window they could see Mrs. Henderson striding down the hallway, designer heels clicking against linoleum, followed by 2 men in suits and a woman in a white coat. "Private doctor and lawyers, I'm guessing," Patricia said grimly. "Stay calm, everyone. Sarah, remember, you have the right to refuse any examination or transfer. Mark, start recording on your phone. Dr. Thomas, please stay. The rest of us should step out." Sarah's heart monitor began to beep faster, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "No, please, everyone stay. I don't want to face her alone, not anymore." Jenny moved to one side of Sarah's bed while Mark took the other. Dr. Thomas stood at the foot, charts ready. Patricia positioned herself near the door, a legal barrier between Sarah and whatever. Storm was about to break. As Mrs. Henderson's clicking heels grew closer, Sarah picked up her sketchbook again. But this time, instead of flowers or landscapes, she began to draw what looked like a shield, surrounded by hands reaching out to strengthen. The monitor's beeping slowed to a steady rhythm. Sarah's hands remained sure and steady. She was ready. Mrs. Henderson burst into the room like a perfectly coiffed hurricane, her Chanel perfume cutting through the antiseptic hospital air. "Sarah, darling, thank goodness I've arrived. These people have been keeping me from properly overseeing your care, but that's all about to change." The 2 lawyers flanked her like expensive bookends, while the private doctor, a sharp-featured woman with cold eyes, hung back near the door, clutching a leather medical bag. "Dr. Morrison here has already arranged your transfer to her private facility," Mrs. Henderson continued, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes hard as steel. "Much more appropriate for someone in your delicate condition." Sarah felt the familiar urge to shrink away, to make herself smaller, but Mark's steady presence on one side and Jenny's quiet strength on the other held her in place. She looked at her mother, really looked at her, and for the first time saw not an overwhelming force of nature, but a desperate woman trying to maintain control. "No," Sarah said quietly. Her mother's perfect smile flickered. "I'm sorry, darling." "I said no." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "I'm not going anywhere. My treatment here is working." "Working?" Mrs. Henderson laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Oh, sweetie, you're confused. Dr. Morrison, please explain Sarah's condition to these people." The private doctor stepped forward, opening her bag. "Mrs. Henderson has extensively briefed me on her daughter's history of mental instability and—" "Extensively fabricated, you mean?" Dr. Thomas interrupted, his young face set with professional anger. He held up his tablet. "I have Sarah's actual medical records right here. Her cognitive functions are excellent. Her latest tests show significant improvement, and she's been making informed decisions about her own care for weeks." "Unauthorized treatment changes," one of the lawyers began, but Patricia cut him off. "Changes authorized by the patient herself, who is both legally adult and demonstrably competent." She stepped forward, her presence filling the small room. "I should introduce myself. Patricia Chen, Sarah's legal counsel, and you are—" The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, but Mrs. Henderson wasn't finished. "This is ridiculous. I'm her mother. I know what's best." "Like you knew what was best when you tried to access my medical records after hours." Sarah's voice shook slightly, but her gaze remained steady. "Or when you told Dr. Richardson that a donation might change his medical opinion." "Or perhaps," Mark added, his phone still recording, "like you knew what was best when you hid the existence of Sarah's trust fund, the one Dad specifically set up to ensure her independence." Mrs. Henderson's facade cracked. For a moment, something ugly and frightened flashed across her face. "Mark, how dare you take her side after everything I've done?" "To keep me dependent," Sarah finished. "To make me believe I was worthless, useless." Her voice broke on the last word, but she pressed. "On, Jenny, play the recording." The sound of Mrs. Henderson's own voice filled the room, dripping with contempt. "You've always been useless. Even getting sick is just another burden you've put on this family." The private doctor took a step back. One of the lawyers closed his briefcase. "Mrs. Henderson," Patricia said into the ringing silence that followed, "I suggest you leave now. Any attempt to remove Sarah from this hospital without her consent will result in immediate legal action, and I believe the hospital board would be very interested in hearing about your attempts to interfere with her treatment." "You can't," Mrs. Henderson began, but for the first time uncertainty had crept into her voice. "I can," Sarah said firmly. "I am. Please leave, Mother." Security arrived then, summoned by Jenny's earlier call. Mrs. Henderson looked around the room at the wall of faces standing between her and her daughter, and something seemed to deflate inside her. "This isn't over," she hissed, but the threat sounded hollow. As the security guards escorted Mrs. Henderson and her entourage out, Sarah's hands began to shake. Mark immediately wrapped an arm around her shoulders, while Jenny checked her vitals. "You did it," Jenny whispered. "You stood up to her." Sarah nodded, tears finally spilling over. But for the first time in her life, they weren't tears of fear or shame. They were tears of relief, of release, of something that felt surprisingly like freedom. Through her tears, she looked at her latest drawing, the shield surrounded by supporting hands. Somehow, without realizing it, she had drawn herself standing in the center, straight-backed and strong. It wasn't over, she knew. Her mother wouldn't give up easily, but neither would Sarah, not anymore. Patricia Chen's office materialized in Sarah's hospital room the next morning, transforming the small space into a command center of legal strategy. Files spread across the portable table, laptop humming, while Patricia methodically built their case. "Medical records don't lie," she explained, highlighting passages on her tablet. "Though people certainly try to manipulate them. Look at this prescription history from last year." Sarah leaned forward, Mark at her shoulder. The documentation showed a pattern. Medications added, doses increased, symptoms reported that didn't match her actual condition. "Mom always insisted on managing my medications herself," Sarah said quietly. "She'd portion them out every morning and evening, said I couldn't be trusted to remember properly." Patricia's eyes met Jenny's across the room. And did you ever see the actual bottles? The labels? Sarah's silence was answer enough. We've found similar discrepancies going back years, Dr. Thomas added, pointing to another file. Symptoms would mysteriously worsen before important events. School enrollment, summer programs, anything that might have given Sarah more independence. Mark's jaw clenched. Munchausen by proxy? Not exactly, Patricia replied. This feels more calculated. The manipulation increased significantly after your father's death and escalated around any potential financial or legal milestones. Jenny, who had been quietly organizing Sarah's current medication tray, spoke up. Sarah's condition has improved dramatically since she's been here, on a controlled regimen, no mysterious setbacks, no unexplained symptoms, because Mum can't interfere anymore, Sarah whispered, realization dawning in her eyes. She's been making me sick. All these years, Patricia reached across the table, her hand warm on Sarah's. This is why documenting everything is crucial. Your mother's lawyers will try to paint you as mentally incompetent, unable to make your own decisions. But we're building a different picture, a systematic pattern of medical abuse for financial gain. The trust fund, Mark said. But why wait so long? Why not try to gain control years ago? The terms, Patricia explained, pulling up their father's will. The trust becomes irrevocable at 21. Before that, if the beneficiary is deemed incompetent, control reverts to the guardian, permanently. Your mother's been playing a long game, weakening Sarah physically and mentally, isolating her, creating a paper trail of instability. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for her sketchbook, her new anchor in moments of stress. Will anyone believe us? Mom has so many connections, so much influence. Evidence speaks louder than influence, Patricia assured her. Every nurse, doctor, and staff member who's witnessed her behavior, security footage, the recording, your improved medical tests, and now, she gestured to the stack of records, proof of medical manipulation. There's something else, Jenny said hesitantly. The night security guard mentioned Mrs. Henderson trying to access the pharmacy department. After hours last week, the cameras caught her attempting to use an unauthorized keycard. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. That's criminal behavior. Was a report filed? Security has the footage, Jenny confirmed, and I've been keeping detailed notes of every incident. Good. Patricia began typing rapidly. We're not just playing defense anymore. Your mother's actions cross several legal lines. Medical abuse, attempted fraud, possibly criminal endangerment. Sarah's pencil moved across paper, almost of its own accord. The image taking shape looked like a tangled web, but with sharp scissors, beginning to cut through the strands. What do you need from me? She asked, her voice stronger than she expected. Courage, Patricia said simply. The hearing will be difficult. Your mother's lawyers will try to provoke an emotional response, to prove you're unstable. They'll dig into painful memories, twist your words. They'll try to break you, Mark interrupted, protective anger in his voice. But they won't succeed, Patricia finished, because you're not alone anymore, Sarah, and you're stronger than they know. Sarah looked down at her drawing, then around the room at these people who had become her defenders, her support system, her new kind of family. The fear was still there. She suspected it always would be, but it no longer felt like drowning. When is the hearing? She asked. 3 days, Patricia replied. We'll be ready. Sarah nodded, adding final touches to her sketch. The scissors in the drawing were held by many hands, all working together to cut through the web of lies. Yes, she said, we will be. Mark stood at the window of Sarah's hospital room, his reflection ghostly in the pre-dawn glass. He hadn't slept, his usual pristine appearance rumpled after hours of internal struggle. Behind him, Sarah slept peacefully for the first time in days, her sketchbook open beside her. Coffee? Jenny appeared at his elbow, offering a steaming cup. You look like you need it. Thanks. He accepted the cup, his hands unusually unsteady. Mom called last night. She knows about the evidence I've given Patricia. Jenny waited, sensing there was more. She reminded me of everything she's done for me. The private schools, the connections that got me into law school, my position at the firm. He laughed bitterly. Did you know she's on the board of directors? What are you going to do? Mark turned from the window, his eyes finding Sarah's sleeping form. When I was 10, Sarah got sick, really sick, with pneumonia. Mom was hosting some charity gala, told me to keep an eye on her. Sarah's fever got so high she became delirious, calling for Dad. I panicked, called an ambulance. He paused, taking a shaky sip of coffee. Mom left the gala early, arrived at the hospital in her evening gown. I thought she'd be proud of me for taking care of my sister. Instead, his free hand clenched. She was furious, said I'd embarrassed her, made a scene. 2 days later, I was enrolled in boarding school. Didn't see Sarah again for months. She separated you, Jenny said softly. Isolated you both. I told myself it was normal, that Mom just wanted the best for us, the best education for me, the best care for Sarah. But watching her get sicker, seeing Mom's control tighten, he set the coffee down untouched. I abandoned her, didn't I? My little sister. You were a child, Jenny reminded him. You both were. Not anymore. Mark's voice hardened. Mom called to remind me what I owe her. But everything I have, the education, the career, the connections, it's just another web like the one she wove around Sarah. A small sound made them both turn. Sarah was awake, watching her brother with tears in her eyes. Mark, he crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hand. I'm so sorry, Squirt. I should have seen it sooner. Should have been here. You're here now, she whispered. Yes, he squeezed her hand. And I'm not going anywhere. Mom can take the job, the connections, all of it. I've got evidence she doesn't know about. Documents I found while clerking at the firm, financial records, emails. She didn't just manipulate your medical care, Sarah. She's been embezzling from her own charity foundation for years. Jenny's breath caught. The same foundation your father was investigating before his accident. Brother and sister looked at each other, a horrible suspicion dawning in their eyes. I need to call Patricia, Mark said, already reaching for his phone. And then the district attorney's office. Mom's not just fighting for control of your trust fund anymore. She's fighting to keep her whole house of cards from collapsing. Sarah's grip on his hand tightened. Are you sure? You'd be giving up everything. No, Mark interrupted. I'm finally choosing what matters. My sister. The truth. He managed a small smile. Besides, any firm would be lucky to have a lawyer who helped expose one of the biggest charity fraud cases in the state and took down an abuser, Jenny added quietly. Sarah reached for her sketchbook with her free hand. The page showed her latest drawing, 2 small figures holding hands walking away from a looming shadow. We were just kids, she said softly. But we're not anymore. Mark looked at the drawing, then at his sister, seeing not the fragile invalid their mother had created, but the strong young woman emerging from that chrysalis of lies. No, he agreed, we're not. And Mom's about to learn exactly what that means. The hospital boardroom felt impossibly large, with its mahogany table stretching like a polished river, between Sarah and the 12 board members seated before her. Her wheelchair, insisted upon by Patricia for both strategic and practical reasons, felt less like a weakness now and more like a throne from which to tell her truth. Dr. Richardson, the chief of medicine, sat at the center of the table, his usual warm demeanor replaced by professional gravity. Miss Henderson, we've convened this emergency session to address serious allegations regarding your care and your mother's conduct within our facility. Sarah's hands rested in her lap, no longer trembling. Jenny stood behind her wheelchair, a quiet pillar of strength, while Dr. Thomas arranged his presentation materials with precise movements that betrayed his nervous energy. Before we begin, a sharp voice cut through the room. Mrs. Henderson swept in, followed by her lawyers. I must object to this irregular proceeding. My daughter is clearly not in a state to— Mrs. Henderson, Dr. Richardson interrupted. You are here as an observer only at the board's discretion. Please take a seat. Sarah felt her mother's fury like a physical wave, but kept her eyes forward. Dr. Thomas began his presentation, his young voice steady as he outlined Sarah's medical history. Under controlled hospital conditions, with medication properly administered and documented, Sarah's condition has improved dramatically. He displayed charts showing clear, upward trends. These results directly contradict the symptoms reported by Mrs. Henderson over the past several years. One of the board members, an elderly woman with keen eyes, leaned forward. And you can verify these improvements? Multiple staff members have documented Sarah's progress. Jenny stepped in, her voice clear. But perhaps more telling is this security footage. The screen behind them flickered to life, showing Mrs. Henderson attempting to access the pharmacy department after hours, then trying to bribe an orderly for access to Sarah's medication chart. The footage had no sound, but her desperation was clear in every movement. Mrs. Henderson's lawyer stood. "This is circumstantial. Perhaps this will clarify matters," Patricia said, entering with a thick folder. "Records from the Henderson family pharmacy showing prescriptions filled in Sarah's name. Prescriptions that never appeared in her official medical chart, ordered by Mrs. Henderson using her position on various hospital boards as leverage." The board members began murmuring among themselves. Sarah took a deep breath and reached for her sketchbook, not to draw this time, but to share. "I'd like to show you something," she said, her voice quiet but carrying. "Over the past few weeks, I've been documenting my journey here in a different way." The sketchbook was passed around the table. Page after page showed Sarah's progression, early drawings full of shadows and tangled webs, gradually giving way to images of light, of helping hands, of strength emerging from darkness. The final drawing showed the hospital itself, reimagined, as a fortress of healing, its windows glowing with warmth. "Art therapy has been a crucial part of Sarah's recovery," Dr. Thomas explained. "Along with her improved physical symptoms, we've seen remarkable emotional and psychological growth. Growth that someone seems very invested in preventing," Patricia added pointedly, laying out more documents. Financial records showing Mrs. Henderson's systematic efforts to maintain control over her daughter's trust fund, medical decisions, and personal autonomy. Mrs. Henderson surged to her feet. "This is absurd. Everything I've done has been for Sarah's own good. Like falsifying my symptoms." Sarah's voice cut through her mother's protests. "Like isolating me from Mark. Like making me believe I was worthless." The boardroom fell silent. Sarah wheeled herself forward slightly, facing the board directly. "I'm not asking you to solve my family's problems. I'm asking you to protect your patients, not just me, but anyone else who might face similar manipulation. My mother has used her influence and connections to abuse the medical system, to maintain control over my life and my father's legacy." She gestured to her sketchbook, still being passed among the board members. "Those drawings show my truth. Every test, every improvement, every moment of clarity I've gained here proves that truth. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for justice." Dr. Richardson studied Sarah for a long moment, then turned to Mrs. Henderson. "In light of this evidence, and pending further investigation, this board has no choice but to suspend your visiting privileges and any input into your daughter's medical care. Furthermore, we will be cooperating fully with the legal authorities regarding the pharmaceutical irregularities." "You can't," Mrs. Henderson began, but her lawyer gripped her arm, whispering urgently in her ear. Sarah watched her mother's face cycle through rage, disbelief, and finally, for just a moment, fear. The same fear she'd instilled in her daughter for so many years. "The board will release its full findings within 24 hours, Dr. Richardson concluded. Miss Henderson, you will continue to receive care here under Dr. Thomas's supervision, with full autonomy over your medical decisions." As the board members filed out, many pausing to look again at Sarah's drawings, Jenny squeezed her shoulder gently. "You did it," Sarah nodded, watching her mother being led away by her increasingly concerned-looking lawyers. The victory felt different than she'd imagined. Not triumphant exactly, but quiet, solid, real, like the foundation of something new being built from the ashes of something broken. The video went viral on a Tuesday morning. Someone, likely one of Mrs. Henderson's increasingly nervous associates, had leaked Jenny's recording to a local news station. By noon, Sarah's story was trending across social media platforms, her mother's cold voice echoing through millions of phones and computers. "You've always been useless. Even getting sick is just another burden you've put on this family." "It's everywhere," Mark said, scrolling through his phone in Sarah's hospital room. "The major networks have picked it up. Social media is exploding. Mom's charity foundation has already issued a statement temporarily suspending her from the board." Sarah sat in the window seat, her strength improving enough now for short periods out of bed, watching rain pattern the glass. "How bad is it? For Mom?" "Nuclear." Mark showed her his screen. "Her society friends are running for cover. 3 other hospital boards have suspended her voting rights pending investigation and—" He paused, looking uncertain. "There are others coming forward, other families, other victims." Jenny, organizing medications nearby, added softly, "The nurses' message boards are full of similar stories. Your mother's reputation for managing her daughter's care wasn't unique to this hospital. Sarah's hands moved automatically to her sketchbook, but instead of drawing, she found herself reading the comments Mark was showing her on various posts. My mother did the same thing. Made me believe I was crazy for years. I thought I was. Alone. That no one would believe me. Who's investigating the charity foundation? My aunt donated thousands. It's not just about me anymore, is it? Sarah whispered. It never was, Patricia said, entering with a stack of papers. Your mother's carefully constructed public image is crumbling. The DA's office is investigating the foundation's finances. 3 other families have come forward with similar stories of medical manipulation at hospitals where your mother held board positions. And look at this, Mark added, pulling up another page. An online support group had formed overnight. Survivors of medical abuse and control. The profile picture was an artist's rendering of broken chains transforming into butterflies. Sarah's phone, newly purchased, her old one having been controlled by her mother, buzzed with another message. A local art therapy program wanted to feature her hospital drawings in an exhibition about healing through art. It's overwhelming, she admitted, watching more notifications appear. You don't have to respond to any of it, Jenny assured her. Your healing comes first. But Sarah was already reaching for her sketchbook with new purpose. Actually, I want to draw something. For them. For everyone who's been trapped like I was. As she worked, the room fell into comfortable silence, broken only by the soft scratch of pencil on paper and the steady rain outside. Mark fielded calls from reporters. While Patricia prepared documents for the upcoming legal proceedings, Jenny monitored Sarah's vital signs with practiced ease, noting with satisfaction how stable they remained even amid the chaos. The drawing took shape slowly, a complex web of interconnected hands, some reaching up from darkness, others extending, down with light streaming from their palms. In the center, a figure that looked like Sarah stood with her own hands outstretched, both receiving and offering help. May I? Jenny asked when Sarah finished. At her nod, Jenny took a photo of the drawing and posted it to the support group with a simple caption, "You are not alone." You never were. Within minutes, the responses began flowing in. Thank you for being brave. Your story gave me courage to tell mine. I'm calling my lawyer tomorrow. How did you find the strength? Sarah stared at the messages, tears blurring. Her vision. I didn't do it alone, she said finally. I couldn't have. No one should have to, Mark agreed, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Patricia's phone buzzed. Her expression as she read the message was grimly satisfied. The DA's office just issued a search warrant for your mother's home office and the Foundation's financial records. They're moving fast. The public attention has forced their hand. Mum won't go down without a fight, Mark warned. No, Sarah agreed, adding final touches to her drawing. But neither will we. And we're not fighting. Just for me anymore. Outside, the rain began to ease, thin streams of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Sarah's phone kept buzzing with notifications, each one representing another thread in a growing tapestry of solidarity and support. Jenny smiled as she checked Sarah's vital signs one last time. Perfect readings, she announced. You're stronger than ever. Sarah looked down at her drawing, then at the growing community of survivors and supporters gathering in the digital space. We all are, she said softly. We all are. The courthouse loomed like a marble mountain, its steps crawling with reporters and photographers who turned like a wave at Sarah's arrival. Mark guided her wheelchair with steady hands, while Patricia walked beside them, deflecting questions. With practiced ease, Jenny followed close behind, carrying a folder of medical records and, at Sarah's insistence, the sketchbook. Inside the courtroom, Mrs. Henderson was already seated with her legal team, her designer suit and perfect makeup, a stark contrast to her ashen complexion. She didn't look at Sarah directly, but her fingers drummed an anxious rhythm on the table before her. Remember, Patricia murmured as they took their places, she'll try to provoke an emotional response. Stay calm, stay focused. Your strength is in your truth. Judge Martinez entered, her dark eyes sweeping the packed courtroom before settling on Sarah. This emergency hearing will address the petition for medical guardianship of Sarah Henderson, as well as related allegations of medical abuse and financial misconduct. Mrs. Henderson, your lawyers may begin. Richard Collins, Mrs. Henderson's lead attorney, approached with practiced sympathy oozing from every gesture. Your Honor, We're here today because a troubled young woman has been influenced by outside parties to turn against the mother who has devoted her life to caring for her. He presented a carefully curated medical history, painting a picture of Sarah as unstable, manipulated, unable to make rational decisions. Mrs. Henderson's only crime is caring too much, perhaps, trying too hard to protect a vulnerable daughter who— Objection, Patricia interrupted. Counsel is editorializing. Sustained. Mr. Collins, please stick to facts. Sarah watched her mother during Collins's presentation, noting the slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted to the courtroom doors. She looked, Sarah realized, like someone counting escape routes. When Patricia rose to present their case, the change in energy was palpable. Your Honor, we're not here about a mother's love. We're here about control, manipulation, and calculated abuse spanning nearly 2 decades. She laid out their evidence methodically. The recorded verbal abuse, the medication discrepancies, the suspicious pattern of symptom escalation before important milestones. Dr. Thomas testified about Sarah's remarkable improvement under controlled hospital care. Jenny presented her detailed documentation of Mrs. Henderson's attempts to interfere with treatment. Then came Mark's testimony. Mom, he said, looking directly at his mother for the first time since entering the courtroom, would you like to explain these emails I found in the Foundation's archive? Mrs. Henderson's face went from ashen to white. On the screen behind Mark, emails appeared showing conversations about insurance fraud, medication manipulation, and most damning discussions about Sarah's trust fund dating back years. Or perhaps, Mark continued, his voice harder now, you'd like to explain these financial records showing systematic embezzlement from the Foundation. The same records Dad was investigating before his accident. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Mrs. Henderson's lawyers huddled in urgent consultation. And finally, Mark said, pulling out one last document, this letter from Dad to his law partner dated the day before his death, expressing concerns about brake tampering on his car. Mrs. Henderson stood abruptly, swaying. I need a recess. Sit down, Mrs. Henderson, Judge Martinez ordered. Mr. Henderson, are you suggesting the police have reopened the investigation into our father's death? Mark confirmed. Based on new evidence. Sarah felt the room spin slightly, Jenny steady, hand on her shoulder grounding her. All these years, all these lies, and Your Honor, Patricia said into the shocked silence. Given this new evidence and the ongoing criminal investigation, we ask that all of Mrs. Henderson's access to Sarah's medical and financial decisions be immediately and permanently revoked. No, Mrs. Henderson's cry was raw, desperate. Sarah, darling, you can't believe these lies. Everything I did was for you. Mrs. Henderson, the judge warned. But Sarah was already wheeling herself forward, her voice clear and steady. Everything you did was for yourself, Mother. You kept me sick to keep me dependent. You isolated me to keep me weak. You probably killed Dad to keep your secrets. She opened her sketchbook to her latest drawing, a portrait of her father, smiling and strong, surrounded by butterflies breaking free from cocoons. But I'm not weak anymore. And I'm not afraid of you. Mrs. Henderson crumpled into her chair as Judge Martinez began delivering her ruling. Sarah barely heard the legal details. Full medical autonomy restored, financial control of the trust fund guaranteed, restraining order granted. She was watching her mother instead, seeing clearly for the first time not a towering figure of authority, but a small, frightened woman whose web of lies had finally irreversibly unraveled. Outside the courtroom, reporters surged forward with questions, but Sarah felt oddly peaceful. Her hand found Mark's, squeezed tight. Ready to go home? He asked softly. Sarah looked at her support team, Mark, Jenny, Patricia, Dr. Thomas, and smiled. I already am. The storage unit smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Mark held the flashlight steady as Sarah wheeled herself between rows of boxes, each labeled in their father's precise handwriting. After the hearing, their father's old law partner had mentioned this place, a secret storage unit their father had maintained, unknown to their mother. Here, Sarah called, her hand resting on a box marked, For My Children, 2006, the year of his death. Mark lifted it down carefully, setting it on a nearby table. Inside, beneath layers of careful packaging, they found dozens of letters, each dated and sealed. To be opened on Sarah's 21st birthday. Mark read from one envelope. To be opened on Mark's graduation. To be opened if anything happens to me. His voice caught on the last one. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the first letter. Their father's handwriting flowed across the page, as familiar as a forgotten lullaby. My dearest Sarah and Mark, if you're reading this, then my fears were justified. I've discovered something terrible about your mother's foundation: systematic fraud, embezzlement, money being funneled into private accounts. But worse than the financial crimes are her plans for you both. Sarah, my precious girl, I've seen her tampering with your medication. I've documented everything, included copies in this box. She's been deliberately making you sick, creating dependencies I don't fully understand. I plan to take you both away, to expose everything. But she must have suspected. The brake lines on my car were damaged yesterday. I've reported it, left evidence with my partner, but if anything happens... Sarah's voice failed. Mark took the letter, continuing, Mark, my son, I'm so sorry for sending you away to school. I thought I was protecting you, giving you distance from her influence. I never imagined she would use that distance to isolate you from Sarah. The trust funds I've established for you both are meant to ensure your independence, but I fear she'll find ways to maintain control. There's more you need to know. In the blue folder, you'll find documentation of your mother's history, a pattern of manipulation and control going back to her own childhood, previous marriages, other victims. She's done this before, children. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. Jenny, who had accompanied them along with Patricia, helped Sarah open the blue folder. Newspaper clippings, court records, and private investigator reports told a chilling story. 2 previous marriages, both to wealthy men who died under suspicious circumstances. Other children, now estranged, who had been systematically isolated and controlled. She's a predator, Patricia said quietly, examining the documents. These will be crucial for the criminal investigation. Sarah pulled out another letter, this one marked with her name and a simple heart. Inside was a sketch, her father's attempt at art, charmingly amateur, of her as a little girl surrounded by butterflies. Remember when you were 6, the note. Read, and you found that butterfly with the broken wing? You spent days nursing it back to health, refusing to believe it wouldn't fly again. That's who you are, Sarah. Someone who sees beauty and strength where others see weakness. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Your mother will try to clip your wings, keep you in a cage of her making. But you are meant to fly, my darling girl. Both of you are. The truth in this box is your key. Use it wisely, use it well. I love you both more than words can say. If I'm no longer there to protect you, protect each other. And remember, you are so much stronger than you know. All my love, Dad. Sarah's tears fell on the sketch, but she didn't wipe them away. These were different tears than the ones her mother had caused. They were tears of healing, of truth finally uncovered. Mark sat heavily on a nearby box, their father's letters clutched in his hands. All these years, he was trying to save us, even after. He couldn't finish. He did save us, Sarah said softly. He left us everything we needed to free ourselves. We just had to be ready to find it. Jenny picked up another document. Medical records from Sarah's childhood, showing normal test results that had somehow become symptoms of chronic illness in their mother's carefully crafted narrative. This explains why your recovery in the hospital was so dramatic, she said. Once your mother lost control of your medication, I could actually heal, Sarah finished. She pulled out her sketchbook, opening to a fresh page. The image forming under her pencil was of a butterfly emerging from not just a cocoon, but from a tangle of deliberately woven threads, trapped not by nature but by malice. Dad knew, Mark said, still reading through letters. He knew she'd try to use my career against me, try to buy my silence with success. That's why he set up the trust funds the way he did, so we'd have resources she couldn't control. Patricia was already photographing documents, organizing them for the ongoing investigation. Your father built a strong case. With this evidence, combined with what we already have, she'll go to prison, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Patricia confirmed. For a very long time, Sarah looked around the storage unit, at the boxes full of their father's love and foresight, at her brother's tear-stained face, at Jenny's compassionate presence, and Patricia's determined efficiency. The truth had been here all along, waiting for them to be strong enough to face it. She added final touches to her butterfly drawing. This one wasn't trapped or struggling. It was soaring, free and strong, leaving broken threads behind. The Charity Foundation's annual gala should have been Mrs. Henderson's crowning social event. Instead, the elegant ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel had become the stage for her final unraveling. Sarah watched from her seat near the entrance, as her mother, uninvited but somehow unstopped by security, stumbled toward the podium where the new board chairman was speaking about organizational transparency and a new era of accountability. "You're sure you want to be here?" Mark whispered, his hand protective on Sarah's shoulder. She wasn't in the wheelchair anymore. Weeks of proper treatment had strengthened her enough for short periods of walking, but they'd brought it just in case. "I need to be here," Sarah replied, her sketchbook open on her lap. She'd been documenting the scene, the uncomfortable shifts of the socialites who had once fawned over her mother, the nervous glances of the staff, the determined stance of Patricia near the stage. "This is all a lie," Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked through the room like breaking crystal. She looked almost unrecognizable, her designer outfit wrinkled, her perfectly coiffed hair showing grey at the roots. "Everything I built, everything I sacrificed for—" "Mrs. Henderson," the chairman tried to interrupt, "this is a private event." "Private? Like the private accounts where you're all hiding my foundation's money?" She laughed, a sharp, dangerous sound. "I built this foundation. I created all of this." Sarah's pencil moved across paper, capturing her mother's desperation in swift, sure strokes. The woman on the page was smaller somehow than the towering figure of Sarah's childhood. Puppet master, whose strings had finally snapped. "And you!" Mrs. Henderson's wild eyes found Sarah in the crowd. "My own daughter, my own blood, after everything I did for you." Sarah stood slowly, steady on her feet. "You mean after everything you did to me?" The room fell silent. Even the security guards moving toward Mrs. Henderson paused. "I gave you everything." Mrs. Henderson's voice rose hysterically. "I dedicated my life to caring for you. You dedicated your life to controlling me," Sarah corrected, her voice clear and calm. "To keeping me sick, dependent, afraid. But that's over now." "You ungrateful—" Mrs. Henderson started forward, but Mark stepped in front of Sarah. He didn't speak, he didn't have to. His presence alone, the son whose success she'd tried to buy, standing with the daughter she'd tried to break, seemed to stagger her. "Would you like to explain to everyone here what was really in those medications you kept insisting I needed?" Sarah continued, taking a step forward. "Or should we talk about Dad's brake lines, or maybe your 2 previous marriages?" Mrs. Henderson's face went from red to white. Around the room phones were recording, witnesses to her collapse. "You don't understand," she whispered, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. "I had to maintain control, had to keep our family's image perfect." Had to what, Mom? Kill Dad when he discovered the truth? Keep me sick so you could steal my trust fund? Push Mark away so he couldn't protect me? Each question landed like a physical blow. The only thing you had to do was be a mother. And you couldn't even do that. Mrs. Henderson swayed, reaching for a nearby table. "I can change," she said suddenly, her voice shifting to the honeyed tones Sarah remembered from childhood manipulation. "Darling, we can get help, therapy, whatever you need. We're still family." "No." Sarah's response was gentle but absolute. "We're not. Family doesn't poison family. Family doesn't isolate and abuse and destroy. You're not my mother anymore. You're just the woman who tried to break me and failed." The security guards were moving in now, but Mrs. Henderson barely seemed to notice. She was staring at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time, not as a possession to be controlled, but as a person who had slipped entirely beyond her grasp. "You need me," she tried one last time, desperate. "You've always needed me." Sarah opened her sketchbook, turning it to show the room her latest drawing, a portrait of her mother, not as the polished socialite or the monstrous manipulator, but as she truly was, a small, fractured woman trapped in a web of her own making. "No, Mom, I don't. Not anymore." Mrs. Henderson's legs gave out. As she crumpled to the floor, her handbag spilled open, revealing prescription bottles with Sarah's name. More evidence for the growing criminal case. The security guards reached her at last, helping her up as she sobbed. The crowd parted silently as they led her away, her perfect facade finally irrevocably shattered. Sarah felt Mark's arm around her shoulders, heard Jenny's quiet arrival behind them. Her legs were tired, but she remained standing. On her lap, the sketchbook was open to a new blank page. "Ready to go?" Mark asked softly. Sarah nodded. taking one last look at the scene of her mother's collapse. Then she began to draw something new, not the ending of her mother's story, but the beginning of her own. 3 months after her mother's public breakdown, Sarah sat in Dr. Thomas's office for her final weekly checkup. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching the silver charm bracelet on her wrist, a gift from the hospital staff, each charm representing a milestone in her recovery. "Your latest tests are remarkable," Dr. Thomas said, genuine pleasure in his young face. "Blood work normal, energy levels stable, no sign of the chronic fatigue that was supposedly defining your life." He shook his head. "It's amazing what the body can do when it's not being systematically poisoned." Sarah touched the butterfly charm on her bracelet. "And the psychological evaluation? Dr. Chen says you're making excellent progress, though she'd like you to continue weekly sessions, especially now that you're starting your new project." The project was Sarah's idea, a support group and art therapy program for survivors of medical abuse, hosted at Memorial Hospital. Already, dozens of people had signed up, many of them survivors who'd reached out after her story went public. "Speaking of progress," Jenny said from her usual spot by the door, "have you told them your other news?" Sarah smiled, pulling out her latest sketchbook. "I've been commissioned to create a series of healing-themed murals for the hospital's new wing. Real art, on real walls." Her voice held wonder at the thought. "They want to call it the Butterfly Wing." "Perfect name," Dr. Thomas approved. "Though we'll have to schedule the painting around your college classes." That was another miracle. Acceptance to the local university's art therapy program, funded by her now unrestricted trust fund. Sarah's portfolio, filled with the drawings that had documented her journey from victim to survivor, had earned her a special scholarship. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mark stood there, his lawyer's suit slightly rumpled, his face bearing the tired but satisfied look it had worn since the criminal trials began. "Hey, Squirt, ready for family therapy?" Family therapy had been Patricia's suggestion, a way for Sarah and Mark to rebuild their relationship while processing their shared trauma. Their sessions often ended in tears, but they were healing tears, washing away years of forced separation and manipulation. "How was court?" Sarah asked, as they walked together toward the therapy wing, Jenny accompanying them out of habit rather than necessity now. "Mom took a plea deal," Mark said quietly. 20 years minimum. No possibility of early parole. The evidence from Dad's storage unit sealed it. He ran a hand through his hair, their father's gesture a genetic echo of love and worry. They're reopening the investigations into her previous marriages too. Other families reaching out, other victims. Sarah nodded, processing. She'd stopped calling Catherine Henderson Mom weeks ago, another step in her healing journey. And the foundation? Being completely restructured. The new board wants to create a special fund for survivors of medical abuse. He smiled slightly. They want to call it the Sarah Henderson Fund for Recovery and Empowerment. They reached the therapy room, where Dr. Chen waited with her gentle smile and knowing eyes. The walls were decorated with art from Sarah's support group, drawings of broken chains, opening doors, rising suns. "Before we start," Sarah said, opening her sketchbook, "I want to show you something." The drawing she'd been working on showed 2 children, a boy and a girl, standing in a garden of butterflies. Behind them loomed a dark web, but it was torn and breaking. Above them, a face watched from the clouds. Their father, smiling his crinkly-eyed smile. "It's for the mural," she explained. "But also, it's us. Who we were, who we are, who we're becoming." Mark's eyes glistened. "Dad would be proud of you." "Of us," Sarah corrected. "We survived her together." Dr. Chen gestured them to their usual seats. "Shall we begin?" As they settled in, Sarah glanced out the window. A butterfly, a real one, orange and black against the blue sky, fluttered past. Once she might have seen it as a taunting reminder of her captivity. Now she saw it differently, as proof that transformation was possible, that broken things could heal, that freedom, once found, could never be taken away. "Yes," she said, turning back to her brother and her therapist. "We're ready to begin." The butterfly charm on her bracelet caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across her open sketchbook. On the blank page, she started a new drawing, not of who she had been, but of who she was becoming. The lines flowed sure and strong from her pencil, no hesitation, no fear. Every stroke was a choice, every shadow a truth revealed, every bright Space of future reclaimed. She was finally, freely herself. The gallery lights cast soft halos around each piece, illuminating Sarah's journey in sweeping strokes and delicate details. Metamorphosis, a survivor's story, read the exhibition title, and beneath it, by Sarah Henderson. No mother's name. Attached, no shadow of control, just her own identity, strong and clear. The opening night crowd moved through the space with hushed reverence. Sarah's hospital sketches had evolved into powerful works of art, large canvases depicting the stages of her imprisonment and escape, each butterfly motif more elaborate than the last. The centerpiece, titled Father's Watch, showed a man's gentle hands cupped around a chrysalis, protecting it until it was strong enough to break free. "It's incredible," Jenny whispered, squeezing Sarah's hand. She'd traded her nurse's scrubs for her elegant dress, but her presence still carried that same steady comfort it had in the hospital. "Look how many people came." Indeed, the gallery was packed. Hospital staff mingled with art critics and survivors from Sarah's support group. Dr. Thomas stood near a piece called Medical Manipulation, earnestly explaining to a group of medical students how art therapy had revolutionized their patient care protocols. Patricia moved through the crowd with quiet pride, while Mark worked the room with his lawyer's charm, making sure every sale would benefit the Survivors Foundation. "Sarah Henderson?" a woman approached, clutching a gallery program. I brought my daughter. Your story, your art. It helped us recognize what was happening in our own home." She gestured to a teenage girl hanging back near a painting of broken pill bottles and butterfly wings. "We got out, we got help." Before Sarah could respond, another voice joined in. "Us too." Then another. "Same here." Soon a small group had formed, each with a story of recognition, realization, escape. Sarah's latest sketchbook pressed against her side where she'd tucked it into her dress pocket. Her security blanket transformed into a tool of strength. She pulled it out now, asking each person to sign it, turning their shared survival into another kind of art. "Miss Henderson?" A gallery assistant appeared at her elbow. "There's a situation at the front desk. Someone trying to enter without an invitation. She claims to be my mother." Sarah finished, her voice steady. She'd been expecting this. "Is security handling it?" "Yes, but she's causing a scene. Should I call the police?" Sarah looked around the gallery, at her artwork, shining under gentle lights, at her support system gathered close, at the survivors drawing strength from her story. "No," she said finally. "I'll handle it." Mark appeared at her side instantly. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She touched the butterfly charm on her bracelet. "This is my gallery, my story, my strength. She has no power here." Catherine Henderson stood at the gallery entrance, her prison-pale face twisted with something between rage and desperation. Even in prison-issued clothes, she tried to maintain her aristocratic bearing, but the effect was hollow now, like a child playing dress-up in borrowed authority. "How dare they keep me out?" she was saying to the security guard. "My own daughter's exhibition." "An exhibition about surviving you," Sarah said clearly, walking forward. Her steps were strong and sure, her head high. "You're not welcome here." "Catherine." Her mother flinched at the use of her first name. "Sarah, darling, be reasonable. All these lovely people." Her eyes darted around, still seeking an audience, still trying to control the narrative. "They don't understand our special relationship. They understand perfectly." Sarah gestured to the artwork visible through the gallery doors. "Every manipulation, every lie, every poison pill. It's all there on the walls. I've turned your abuse into art, and people are finally seeing the truth." "Art?" Catherine spat the word. "Wasting your time with drawings while I rot in prison. After everything I sacrificed." "You sacrificed nothing," Sarah interrupted calmly. "You sacrificed me. There's a difference." She pulled out her sketchbook, showing her mother the pages of signatures. "Every name here is someone you could have been to me. A supporter, a protector, a real mother. Instead, you chose to be a cautionary tale." Catherine's face contorted. "You ungrateful—" "No." Sarah's voice cut through the brewing tirade. "You don't get to rewrite this story anymore. My art tells the truth, and the truth has set me free." She nodded to the security guard. "Please escort her out, and make sure the police know she's violated her restraining order." As Catherine was led away, her protests fading into the night, Jenny appeared with a glass of water. "You okay?" Sarah realized her hands were shaking slightly, but not from weakness, from released tension, from triumph, from final liberation. "I'm perfect," she said, and meant it. Back inside, she moved through her gallery with new lightness. She stopped, at each piece, remembering the moment it captured, the dark times in the hospital, the discovery of her father's letters, the courtroom victory, the support group sessions, but most of all, she saw what others were seeing. Not just a story of survival, but a beacon of hope, a light showing others the way out of their own dark cocoons. Near the end of the evening, she found herself before her newest piece, not yet unveiled. With steady hands, she removed the covering, revealing a portrait of a young woman surrounded by a cloud of butterflies, each one carrying away a different piece of pain, transforming trauma into triumph. The title plaque read simply, "Free." 2 years could change everything, Sarah thought, as she walked through the newly renovated butterfly wing of Memorial Hospital. Her mural stretched along the walls, guiding patients and visitors through stages of healing, from darkness to dawn, from bondage to freedom, from isolation to community. "Miss Henderson?" A young nurse hurried up, carrying a familiar-looking sketchbook. "Your next art therapy group is ready. We have 3 new participants today." Sarah smiled, remembering when she'd been the patient, when Jenny had first slipped. Her sketchbook like a lifeline in drowning waters. Now she was the one offering hope through art, her own story a bridge for others to cross. "How's the new support program going?" the nurse asked as they walked. "Growing faster than we expected," Sarah replied. The program, funded by her father's trust and supported by the restructured Henderson Foundation, had expanded to 5 other hospitals. Mark's legal team is handling 3 new cases this month alone. The more stories we share, the more survivors come forward. They passed the hospital boardroom where 2 years ago, Sarah had first stood up to her mother. Now her name was on the door. Sarah Henderson, Director of Creative Therapy Programs. Inside, her father's photo hung beside her medical abuse awareness posters, his gentle eyes watching over the work that had grown from his final act of protection. The art therapy room buzzed with quiet energy. 8 participants sat at tables, arranged in a circle, blank paper before them. Sarah recognized the look in their eyes, part fear, part hope, part desperate need to be understood. "Welcome, everyone," she said, setting down her materials. "I'm Sarah, and I'm a survivor just like you." She touched the butterfly charm on her bracelet, now joined by dozens of others, each representing a survivor who'd found their voice through her program. "Today we're going to talk about transformation." As she spoke, Jenny, now the hospital's head of nursing, slipped in quietly, taking her usual spot by the door. Their eyes met in a moment of shared remembrance. The scared girl in the hospital bed, the nurse who'd seen her truth, the recording that had started it all. "Art gave me my voice back," Sarah continued, opening her current sketchbook. "It helped me understand that what happened wasn't my fault, that the people who tried to break us don't define us." She showed them her latest series, butterflies emerging not just from cocoons but from cages, from chains, from hands that tried to crush instead of care. A thin woman in the back raised her trembling hand. "My husband, he keeps all my medications. Locked away, says I can't be trusted." Her voice faded, but her eyes held desperate recognition. "Oh, you're not alone," Sarah assured her, gesturing to Jenny. This was their practice dance now, art therapy flowing seamlessly into medical intervention, legal support, practical help. "Let's start by drawing what freedom looks like to you." As pencils met paper, Sarah moved among them, offering gentle guidance. Each participant's story was different, but the pattern was familiar. Control disguised as care, isolation masked as protection, abuse hidden behind love's facade. Mark texted, during the session, "Another successful prosecution, another abuser facing justice." The support group network they'd built had become a powerful force for change, their father's legacy living on in every survivor they helped free. "My butterfly looks broken," someone said discouragingly. Sarah knelt beside them. "Look closer," she suggested. "Those broken lines, they're not weakness, they're battle scars, signs of survival, proof that you're stronger than what tried to destroy you." The afternoon light filtered through windows she'd helped design, casting butterfly-shaped shadows from the stained glass installations. 2 years ago, she'd been the one seeking healing. Now she was the one holding the light for others, showing them the way through their own dark cocoons. After the session, Jenny stayed to help clean up. Remember your first drawing here? She asked, straightening art supplies with her usual efficient care. The tangled web? Sarah nodded. I was so scared then, so unsure. And now look at you. Jenny gestured to the room, to the healing sketches. Left behind by today's participants, to the confident young woman Sarah had become. You've built something beautiful from the ruins of what she tried to do to you. Sarah touched her latest sketchbook, its pages filled with both her own continuing journey and the stories of those she helped. We all did, she corrected. Every person who stands up, speaks out, breaks free. We're all building something together. Through the window, she could see the hospital garden where she'd planted butterfly-attracting flowers last spring. Real butterflies danced among the blooms, free and strong, their wings catching the late afternoon sun. 2 years had changed everything, but some things remained constant. The power of truth, the strength of community, the endless possibility of transformation. Sarah opened her sketchbook to a fresh page, ready to capture whatever came next in this ongoing story of survival and hope. The last rays of sunset painted Memorial Hospital's windows in shades of gold, and rose as Sarah finished her final rounds. In her arms, she carried a special gift, a leather-bound sketchbook, its cover embossed with a delicate butterfly design, waiting for its new owner. Room 412, her old room, held a teenage girl named Maya, recently rescued from a situation disturbingly similar to what Sarah had endured. Like Sarah once had, Maya sat curled against her pillows, trying to make herself smaller, watching the door with wary eyes. Hey, Sarah said softly, settling into the chair beside the bed. I brought you something. Maya's eyes flickered to the sketchbook, then away, a gesture Sarah remembered all too well. I'm not very good at art. Neither was I at first. Sarah opened her own sketchbook, showing Maya her earliest hospital drawings. See? All tangled lines and shadows. But that's okay. Art isn't about being good, it's about being true. She turned the pages, letting Maya see the progression. The first tentative butterflies, the growing strength in each stroke. The transformation from darkness to light. This was my journey. Now it's time for you to start yours. Carefully, she placed the new sketchbook in Maya's lap. The girl touched it like it might disappear, like good things always had before. Your father's been arrested, Sarah said gently. The medication tampering, the false prescriptions, it's all documented. You're safe now. Maya's hands trembled. He said no one would believe me, that I was crazy, that I needed him to take care of me. I know. Sarah's voice held the weight of understanding. My mother said the same things. Abusers use the same lies, Maya. But look around, people did believe you, the doctors, the nurses, the police, and me, we all believe you. From her pocket, Sarah pulled out her butterfly charm bracelet, now heavy with dozens of charms. Each of these represents someone like you, like me. Someone who broke free, who found their voice, who turned their pain into power. She unclipped one charm, a tiny silver key, and placed it in Maya's palm. And now you're one of us too. Maya's fingers closed around the charm. How do you stop being afraid? You don't. Not completely, Sarah admitted. But you learn to use that fear. To transform it like a caterpillar transforms in its cocoon. Everything that tried to destroy you becomes the strength you use to fly. Outside the room, Sarah caught glimpses of the hospital's night shift beginning. Jenny training new nurses, Dr. Thomas checking charts, Mark dropping off legal documents for another survivor's case. Her support system had become a support network, spreading wider every day. I keep thinking about my little sister, Maya whispered. She's still at home with him. Sarah reached for her phone. Tell me everything. Mark, my brother, he's a lawyer now, specializing in cases like ours. We can help her too. As Maya talked, her voice growing stronger with each word, Sarah noticed something extraordinary. The girl had opened the sketchbook and begun to draw. Like Sarah's first drawings, the lines were shaky, unsure, but they held the seeds of liberation. Later, that night after Maya had fallen asleep, the sketchbook and charm clutched close, Sarah stood at the window of her old room. The hospital garden below was quiet, its butterfly bushes silvered by moonlight. She opened her own sketchbook one last time, adding a final detail to her latest piece, a chain of butterflies, each one leading the next to freedom, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Everything okay? Jenny's voice came from the doorway, still checking on her, even after all these years. Better than okay, Sarah smiled, showing her the drawing. Maya started her journey today, and somewhere out there, Another survivor is finding their strength. Another butterfly is breaking free. She touched the empty space on her bracelet where Maya's charm had been, knowing it would soon be replaced by another. The cycle of healing continued, each survivor becoming a guide for others, each story of freedom inspiring more wings to spread. "Ready to head home?" Jenny asked. Sarah took one last look around room 412. No longer a place of imprisonment, but a cocoon of transformation for others like Maya. On the wall hung one of her murals, a kaleidoscope of butterflies, each one carrying a small key, all flying together toward dawn. "Yes," she said, closing her sketchbook with quiet certainty. "I'm ready." She stepped into the hallway, her footsteps sure and strong. Behind her, Maya slept peacefully, the new sketchbook cradled in her arms like a promise. Above her, Sarah's butterflies danced across the walls, lighting the way forward, and somewhere, she knew, her father was smiling. The night stretched out before her, full of possibilities, full of hope. Tomorrow would bring new survivors to help, new stories to witness, new wings to strengthen. But for now, in this moment, Sarah Henderson, daughter, sister, artist, healer, survivor, walked toward home, carrying within her the unshakable truth that had set her free. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is not the escape itself, but reaching back to help others find their way to freedom.